Welcome back, everyone, to the Digital Signage Today podcast. I'm Bradley Cooper. I'm the editor of Digital Signage Today. Today, I will be speaking with Jackie Walker. She's the Senior Director of Customer Experience Strategy at Publicis Sapient. We will be discussing how digital signage end users can craft a customer experience strategy for their digital signage. Thank you for joining us. Welcome, everyone, to today's Digital Signage Today podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about how digital signage has operated for customer experience execution and analytics insight. This podcast will in particular describe how brands can build a digital signage strategic frame from a customer experience lens, which could dramatically change the digital signage landscape. Today, we are speaking with Jackie Walker, a Senior Director of Customer Experience Strategy at Publicis Sapient. She will be discussing how digital signage can really impact the customer experience. How are you doing today, Jackie?
I'm doing great, Bradley. Really excited to talk to you this morning.
Awesome. Thanks so much. So our first question for you today is, what does it mean to build a digital signage strategy from a customer experience lens?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. I work at Publicis Sapient. We are a large digital business transformation company. And so we work with customers across all kinds of digital touch points and with all kinds of technology challenges. And so I would say, the first thing is that building a digital signage strategy is not different from building any other customer experience channel. Mm-hmm. Right? So we have clients that will come to us sometimes and say, we need a website, we need a mobile app, and not really know why they need a website or a mobile app. Digital signage, I think, is sometimes the worst offender, right? Customers will think, we need digital signage, right? And they focus really on the what and the how, and don't focus enough on the why, which is, what are the moments of mutual value for customers? What are the friction points that you're trying to solve for a customer with digital signage? And then what's the problem I'm solving for the business or the value I'm creating for the business? I think when our customers are framing the problem from that place of mutual benefit, they're able to create solutions that are much more compelling and will create a lot more value for the brand over time.
So I get the sense that you're kind of saying that digital signage shouldn't be viewed in isolation. So keeping that in mind, what are the key initiatives brands have been taking outside of digital signage that will really impact how they execute digital signage?
Yeah, absolutely. There are a bunch of technology trends that I think have been happening, especially with larger companies that are really going to shape the way that digital signage plays out over the next 5 to 10 years. So the first thing is there's been just huge momentum around customer data in the last 5 years. And that takes a couple different flavors, right? So one is integrated cross-channel analytics. So for a long time, brands have been capturing all this data from their websites, from their mobile apps, from whatever other customer touch points they have. There's been a real move to try to break down intelligence silos and think about how all of that information and customer data comes together cohesively to create a better view of the customer. Loyalty has also been a huge driver, right? So better understanding the customer, their propensity to buy certain things, and creating relevance. That in turn plays into machine learning and AI. And then I think the last thing to your point about the silo is that the last 10 years in enterprise tech have really been about consolidation and streamlining across the tech enterprise, right? And so I think continuing to operate digital signage in a silo is really going to set back all of those efforts. So Sapient has actually developed a digital signage accelerator, which we call Premise, which was really built to deliver API-enabled digital signage for exactly this reason, right? We think that our customers have done all this hard work to consolidate and start to expose content and data to websites, mobile apps, across, consistently across their customer channels. And we really think that the time is right now to start to think about how that actually extends to digital signage as well.
Excellent. So obviously there are lots of technological developments that are happening within digital signage. You have stuff like facial recognition, better content, more dynamic content. So from your perspective, what are some of the technology developments within digital signage that will enable this shift in frame towards a more customer experience-based lens and a more integrated experience?
Yeah, so I think if you look at some of the strongest players in the industry today, they've really ascended because they abstract the complexity of digital signage rollout and operationalization, right? So I think
Mhm.
most customers that you talk to who are contemplating deploying digital signage sort of feel like it's going to be really hard, right? So
Right.
the companies that have made it seem simplest are the ones that have really been very strong. I think the challenge is that those solutions are often black box, right, from front to back. So it's like put
Mhm.
content in the proprietary CMS that's going to be deployed to devices in a proprietary method. And then they're going to use different proprietary systems to monitor and maintain. I think that's going to be a challenge as brands try to more deeply integrate their own enterprise data and content sources. So I think from a hardware standpoint in particular, there have been some really meaningful developments that are going to continue to improve the way that brands are going to be able to deliver on this vision. So the first is open architecture solutions, right, which
Mhm.
really allow hardware management to take place transparently via APIs. That's new, right? Also, the
Right.
rise of alternative operating systems. So if you think back to the olden days, Windows devices are such a pain to manage, but I think there are a lot of
Mhm.
lighter weight operating systems that make it easier now. BrightSign is actually a really great example of the combination of both of those principles, right? The open
Mhm.
architecture and this purpose built operating system. The other thing is just cost, right? So hardware's come down in cost
Right.
and it's improved in resilience, right? So I think the combination of those two things has allowed the conversation to kind of shift from what happens when it breaks to what are the potentials of what we can do in the customer experience, which is to me like the most exciting development.
Right. And I think you brought up some interesting points about how companies can really be intimidated when they look at these huge digital signage projects and they don't really know what sort of questions to be asking or how they can really begin to address the project. So, with that in mind, what, in your opinion, are some of the questions brands should be considering as they think about adding digital signage or evolving their current capability?
Yeah. So, usually I get involved in projects a little later, like the product selection might have already been made, and now a brand
Hmm.
is struggling to think about what they actually do with it. So, the first thing I would say to clients who kind of are considering it today is don't assume you're doing a product bake off, right? I think that's been the
Hmm.
sort of go to way of approaching digital signage is, we need to install a digital menu board. Who are the 5 companies that do digital menu boards? Um, Build or buy is actually becoming a much more nuanced question. And I think build is driving some increasingly compelling total cost of ownership models. So that's the first thing. Um, the second, I would go back to the beginning and think about why is digital signage being deployed, really understanding the specific functional capabilities that are required. Um, and then understanding the overall customer experience roadmap, right? So again, to go to the QSR example, if you're about to deploy digital menu boards and you know that as a brand developing loyalty is a critical goal, thinking through how will a drive-through with menu boards and customer order confirmation kind of reinforce the objectives. If you're not thinking
Hmm.
about that up front, I think it can really later prove to be an impediment because you might end up with a partner who's not able to integrate deeply enough to be able to drive the kinds of customer experiences you're looking for. The other piece is just thinking about how the solution will need to connect to the rest of the enterprise. So, for example, if you know that you're going to be pulling all of your content and assets from an enterprise CMS or an enterprise DAM, really, investigating and poking how your digital signage provider is going to be able to do those integrations. Some of it does get a
Hmm.
little bit nitty gritty in the tech, but I think not enough scrutiny has been paid to the software around digital signage management, and it's had some disappointing outcomes for customers. The other pieces I think
Right.
are, data and decisioning. You look at McDonald's as a great example. They just acquired Dynamic Yield in March of last year, and the reason for that was to, drive decisioning around what products to show to customers. Now, in order for them to get the most out of that, I don't know what they're doing, but I think it's going to require over time a much more open architecture in their digital signage partners to be able to
Hmm.
deliver on that dream. Analytics is the other piece, right? So I was watching
Right.
Starbucks at the Build conference last year, and they were talking about their homegrown analytics platform that they've built in-house. It's called Deep Brew. They're talking about how they're going to use that to deliver customized recommendations for customers on what they should buy. The analytics that are required to empower that level of machine learning are pretty robust, right? And they need to be
Right.
common with the mobile application for loyalty to be able to get the most juice from that squeeze, to use some consultant speak, right? So I think
Right. Right.
understanding that connectivity is becoming more and more critical.
Excellent. So, with all that in mind, how can brands better navigate this digital signage space to enable these customer experience strategies to succeed?
It's a great question. I think, the challenge with most digital signage product companies is that they've kind of grown to do everything by necessity so that they can provide a
Hmm.
turnkey solution, right? So if you're at the Digital Signage Expo, for example, and you go to any booth on the floor, you're going to get told the story about end to end, from sourcing hardware to installing to deploying, and then the software that's going to run the solution. The reality is that, with any product company, whether it's digital signage or otherwise, they do one thing usually really, really well. That's kind of the core, the reason that they got into the business. But then they've
Hmm.
grown organically to meet the needs of their customers. So I think it's really a challenge, especially for digital signage newbies, to kind of try to understand the landscape, understand the different component parts that go into a solution, and develop the right vendor selection criteria. So I think
Hmm.
you have to learn a little bit about the different parts that go into the solution to be able to really like peel back the layers of the onion to get to what's important to you and the specific strengths of any given product solution, and to drive alignment there. So I think that's one piece, is like really get to what are your vendor selection criteria. The second thing is avoid getting sucked into hardware nuances, right? Uh,
Hmm.
and I can sometimes struggle with this myself, because the hardware, I think, is kind of the least understood and most overwhelming piece of it. So when you start talking about, media players, you start talking about screens and bezel widths and contrast ratios, I think it can be very, very overwhelming. So it's easy to think that because it's the least understood part, it's the most important problem to solve. And I would always urge
Right.
clients to resist that urge, right? Don't over
Hmm.
index on the hardware. The hardware itself and the installation services and monitoring and maintenance services are, at the end of the day, mostly commodity services, if you think about it, right? If you think about
Hmm.
how you're going to deliver value from a digital signage installation, the cost about doing monitoring and maintenance well and ensuring that you have good uptime and all of those things, that's important. That will keep your total cost of ownership down, but it's not going to be the thing that drives that incrementality, right? The value from that installation. So I think there's no reason to do those things better than good. I think going back and focusing on, again, the customer experience and the capability from a functional standpoint that's going to deliver those goals, that to me is highly important in driving a successful installation. The other piece, I think, is aligning stakeholders. So I've seen many times that digital signage products are initiated almost exclusively by IT or
Mm-hmm.
exclusively by store operations. In order to deliver on uh, these installations in a way that is super compelling, I think you really need buy-in from at least a couple groups to understand and align on what's important. And the most critical in my mind are, enterprise technology and IT, store operations, and marketing, right? If those
Right.
groups aren't aligned on what they need from a functional capability standpoint to be successful, I think a lot of times these installations can be kind of doomed from the start, not to be dramatic. I think it's
Mm-hmm.
really important to drive value for the business via marketing, make sure marketing knows how they want to deliver on their objectives and what capabilities they're going to need. Avoid creating technology silos, and that's where you really need enterprise IT to kind of be gatekeepers to a certain extent, understand what's feasible, where those enterprise integrations are going to take place and how they're going to take place to make sure the solution is scalable, and then make sure that it's supportable by operations, right? So some
Mm-hmm.
brands will really want to have a high level of transparency into how the installation is going. Other brands want to be more hands off and say, we just want a third party to manage everything for us. I don't want to know every time that a screen goes offline. So actually understanding those three kind of pillars and how they're going to work together to deliver a solution end to end, to me, is pretty critical. And then the last point, and to some extent, this is almost the most important, right? Is future
Mm-hmm.
proof. And clients always ask about future proofing, sometimes in a way that feels like bait, right? Because you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
I think as the speed of change continues to increase dramatically, headroom or future proofing is probably the most important consideration. If you look even this year at the evolution of customer experience that's been brought on by COVID, I think we're starting to see that customer expectations are very, very rapidly evolving, and the types of
Mm-hmm.
capabilities that brands need to have to be able to meet those rising expectations, it's just getting quicker and quicker, right? So thinking about not only what you want to do today or tomorrow or next year in terms of digital signage, but what's the kind of customer experience roadmap for the next 5 to 7 years. I think that's the lens that brands need to start to take, right? You think
Mm-hmm.
about digital signage in particular, once you make that bet and start to install screens and media players in your physical locations, whether it's a QSR, a retail location, a bank, those screens and media players are going to be there for probably the next 7 to 10 years in a lot of cases. So actually understanding, what that customer experience evolution is going to look like, or at least having some guesses, right? I think is really critical to make sure that you're building in the right headroom to be able to have options down the road and not be really limited by what you have deployed.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much, Jackie. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we jump off today?
No, it's been great to talk to you, Bradley. I hope you can tell I'm really passionate about this space. I love helping
Oh, yes.
clients to understand, the kind of intersection between
Mm-hmm.
business value, customer experience, and technology. Um, I've worked with a lot of clients across, kind of multiple verticals. And it's always interesting to me how, every vertical thinks that their problems are really unique. But I think there are so many similarities across the industry. And I hope that brands continue to, learn from each other and think about how we as an industry are going to drive the next kind of evolution of these experiences and start to do them in ways that feel really exciting and fresh for customers, and in ways that are really cohesive with the rest of the rest of a customer experience strategy. So web and mobile and we can start to deliver on this promise of omni-channel that people have been talking about for so long.
Right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Jackie. And it was really great talking with you.
Thanks so much, Bradley.
Thank you.